It's not just strategy. An edge in day trading thrives or dies by the trader behind it. Welcome to Trading Ascension, where the information guides you along the personal and spiritual growth journey toward profitable day trading. I'm Jason E., and in each episode, you'll discover practical self-development tools and transformative mindset practices to break through emotional blocks, mental noise, and self-sabotaging habits, so your mindset can finally support your edge. This show is for growth-minded day traders who want result-focused trading psychology and personal growth tools to sharpen their edge and decrease their emotional swings. If that's you, keep listening because... In today's episode, I want to talk about the situations and circumstances that cause us to make decisions in trading and in life that are not in our goals' best interest. These course-altering moments and what causes them are known as triggers. In scientific and psychological terms, a trigger is a stimulus that rapidly brings up strong emotional, psychological, or a behavioral reaction, often because it's linked to past experiences, and that's consciously or unconsciously, especially stress or trauma. This doesn't have to be a direct link. It can simply be something related in some way or interpreted in a way that sets off alarms within. It's a touchy subject. Being triggered has a stigma. Coming out of it doesn't feel great. And have you ever seen those videos where people, they like look in the other room in their apartment and they see a pair of eyes, or they think they see a person and it's staring at them, from the next room or the closet or something. And then they investigate only to find it's just like a chair with a coat over it and sunglasses hanging out of the pocket, right? Or something, equally normal. Still, this can set off inner safety alarms before they actually do a confirmation. You see, reaction doesn't wait for confirmation. So our trigger stimulus doesn't always have to be real, but we'll believe it is internally in our nervous system. So a helpful tool for us as improving traders is to understand what triggers us individually so we can avoid running a trading session while we have this energy that might ruin that session, right? We want to work with clear beliefs, and we want to be clear on what beliefs cause that reaction. If you want to get a step ahead of consistently making the same bad decisions, this episode is for you. By using a few simple steps, we can decrease the chances that something happening in the market triggers a reaction that forces us backwards on our trading journey. So today we address trading triggers and how to sidestep the mistakes they cause. So let's get into it. A trigger is any internal or external cue that activates an outsized response compared to what is actually happening in the present moment. Now, the word I want to highlight in that definition is outsized, an outsized response. You see, once triggered, we can take actions that are very extreme compared to the catalyst, right? At least to the conscious mind. But that feeling seems very necessary to the nervous system. So we can be triggered and have a scared animal reaction. When I was young, in my neighborhood, there was an abundance of stray and wild animals, right? I lived close to an abandoned industrial area that was overrun with foxes, rabbits, wild dogs, wild cats, right? And when I say wild dogs, I don't mean like hyenas or anything, but just a bunch of strays that grouped together and would form these big dog packs, right? Sometimes you see dogs in packs of 10, 15. And these animals, some of them were just pets that run away and just join the gang for a week and then work their way back to their owner. It was interesting, but some of those animals were feral. right? Not your cute pets. So when I was young, we would chase these animals away, right? Probably wasn't the nicest thing, but it felt like the safest thing for us. We didn't want, the threat while we were playing. And I'm talking like 7, 8, 9 years old, right? So we just, get out of here, dogs, right? Don't come on this block, right? Cats too. And one thing I noticed about the animals that were running away, cats and dogs reacted very differently. A cat would it'd get far enough away. Maybe it'd go up a tree and then it would check on the threat, like look back at us, like da 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 da, and then look back. Right? It would sprint and then just peek, like look back at us. Now a dog, on the other hand, a dog would run for blocks, never looking back. Right? It just kind of fade out of sight. Right? So when humans are triggered, it's usually more of a dog type reaction, way over the top. Right? You miss a trade and then you take a trade that's not in your game plan. You lose a few trades, maybe in a row, and then you blow the whole account, right? Because you're acting out of emotional disappointment and anger. Maybe you face a setback and just stop caring. This is all part of the planned down regulation we've been talking about that gets triggered from upheaval in the nervous system. Now, these triggers can come in the form of a thought, a memory, an image, sound, smell, even like a bodily sensation, just the situation we're in, or an interaction, and bam, you're triggered, right? And fatigue also makes us, I don't know why I said fatigue like that, but fatigue also makes us easier to trigger. We have less emotional control when we haven't met our basic needs, right? And we've all heard of hangry, or if you're just tired, right? Or if you're just not in the mood for someone's shit that day, right? And you lash out. In psychological, and I'm told, and I don't know much about psychiatry, a trigger is described as the stimulus that elicits recall of painful or traumatic memories and can abruptly shift a person into anxiety, panic, anger, shutdown, or these other intense emotional states. And the fact is, people who are easily triggered have some type of unresolved past programming within them. And when I say unresolved, I mean that hasn't been upgraded to align with their current goals, right? It's not a judgment. Nothing's wrong with a trader or a person getting triggered, right? Unless it's the same, hitting their head on the same wall over and over again. But it's just unresolved programming, right? It doesn't match your new updated goals. Maybe you just got these goals. Maybe you haven't imprinted these goals. It's just the inner clash. So how does it happen, right? How do these triggers form in the brain? Well, triggers are learned through associative learning. The nervous system, what it does is it links certain cues with past events and outcomes. And this is a process that we learn rooted in classical conditioning, right? Pavlov talked about this. And also in the operant conditioning, which Skinner talked about. So it starts with an event, but the mind is smart, right? So it looks at what potentially caused the event. And then over time, the brain begins to react to the cue itself, right? Like the dog with the tone or with the sound, right? And with us, it could be a tone or sound or a tone of voice, a facial expression, or anything that seems related to the baggage we're carrying, right? Someone can look at you the way that, someone you didn't like looked at you all the time. And we'll carry out this baggage as if it's the original stress or traumatic situation happening all over again. So this quickly activates these threat circuits and stress hormones within us. And bam, our body is back in that situation, finding a solution to protect us. And very few people do this, but if we want to live a conscious life, not on autopilot, not as an NPC, not just as a personality that we claim as me, but we actually never created ourselves. To escape that, we have to own these parts of ourselves instead of blaming. So current neuroscience, it views triggers less as someone pushed my buttons, and it's more of the nervous system recognizing a familiar pattern and predicting danger before your thinking mind can even evaluate it. In this view, being triggered is your body's protection system, right? Just overreacting for safety, preferring to detect, I guess, a possible threat where there is none, rather than miss the real danger, right? I'd rather, what does it say? Like, you rather be prepared and have nothing happen, right, than have something happen and not be prepared. That's kind of the body's approach in this situation. And it explains why the response can feel intense or irrational in situations that are actually safe. So the ability to even go down the path of day trading means you have a certain level of safety in your life, right? Of course, your money is at risk, but your life itself is not. So if we can start to see these fear filters and what triggers us, we can avoid damaging our goals while in that state, and instead bring awareness and actionable steps to the situation so we can resolve it, or at least we can decrease its flare up when we're day trading. It's not always simple, because unlike that, slow buildup of annoyance that we face in life, a trigger is like an explosive moment or an avalanche, right mountain. For safety, the body escalates fast. So next thing we know, our state of being has been hijacked. The positive thing about being triggered, though, is that it exposes what is hiding deep in the unconscious parts of our psyche. And once it shows itself, if you choose not to ignore it and not to go back on autopilot, you have a real and exciting opportunity to become a better version of who you naturally are, because you're cleaning out something that's been hiding in the corner of the attic. So what can we do to identify these triggers so we can work on them? Well, you identify these personal emotional triggers by tracking when your reactions are bigger than the situation. And then we'll do somewhat of a simple reverse engineering from that cue, the emotion, and the past experience, and we'll see what all got linked together. And this isn't difficult, right? And you don't have to, pay tens of thousands to do it, right? Maybe to learn it, but not today. I can tell you. And I can tell you personally that there are better ways to invest, right? Or no better ways, I should say, in ourselves. But you can still, just with today's show, save some money, save some time, and you can take more ownership over your journey. You're gonna, need to talk to someone or get a coach or anything about, your triggers. That's okay too. We're just getting this information out here. So before you get into addressing your personal triggers, let's talk about a perspective shift for this topic, right? I've been adding these in this show. I think they're helpful because the overarching perspectives and how we see things, it changes a lot, right? Just by positioning how you look at something differently changes a lot about that situation. So I've liked adding these in this season. So first, we need to understand that once we have a set trading plan, successful trading is mostly about the state of being that we take action from. It becomes the most important factor once you have a defined way to engage with the market. That's why most experienced traders know not to engage with the market when they're emotionally compromised, right? And that can be anything from tired, angry, maybe stuck in the past, holding on to things. These are all states of being that can easily push us into emotional collapse, right? Just by a small trigger. Secondly, We can be more vigilant in seeing what triggers us when we don't attach to the triggered reaction, right? So that detachment gives us space to see. We experience states, right? But we are not that state, because that state it's fleeting. It comes and it goes, right? As we witness it, we're still there. And then here comes another state, right? Here comes sadness. Here comes happiness. Here comes joy. Here comes excitement. And we're still there watching. So no state of being lasts forever, right? We have a baseline though, right? And for most of us, maybe not monks, but we travel through these different states every single day. So it helps to see these states of being for what they are. And by not falling asleep in the character of that state, it's easy to portray that what is now will last forever in our mind, because, our mind doesn't have our same view of time. And so that's what makes the trigger so aggressive. It doesn't want to sit forever in that threat. So when we justify a triggered state of being and we defend it, it makes it invisible to any attempts to improve that reaction. And this is why people who say things like, this is just how I am, or I've always been this way, they'll never change in that specific area, because that area hides in the safety net of the personality, which is protected by our human need for continuity, right? We'll do almost anything to prove ourselves right? When we believe that we are something, all of our actions are going to align with that. When we have that, this is who I am, we stand by it. No matter what it does to our life, we'll take actions to ensure that we and others see us that way. And you probably see that in your triggers. You see how you get right back to the same baseline because of that event says, oh, whoa, get us back to safety. Whatever that means, whether that means, the account blown or the certain dollar amount you're back to or up to, right? Because this works all ways. It's all our programming. So when we do these two things, understand we're seeking a proper state of being to trade in, and understand we're not just one fixed state, we clear a mental field of awareness that has a better chance to notice what's going on in the field of our mind. It's hard to see something like creeping up on us if it was in the forest. But when you have that field of clarity you built by embracing these two perspectives, it gives you a much better view of yourself. Not as clouded or crowded in the area sneaking up to you. So I have 7 steps that can help you dissolve these triggers. And the ultimate goal is, as I've been talking about all season, that we have to get our nervous system and our identity in a place that matches our goal. But while we're doing that, we can deal with these triggers day to day in a way that helps us not be sabotaged completely when we are triggered. And just working on them, you'll start decreasing them over time. You'll start to get more confident over time, and you'll start to overcome. So next, we'll talk about these steps. So step 1, and I guess I should have gave these steps names, but let's just say this is notice the outsized reactions. So step 1, we'll start by flagging these moments, right? Calling them out. Anytime your response feels too intense for what just happened, you're overreacting, you're shutting down, you're obsessing, you're wanting to escape, or just feeling uneasy inside, like you need something to happen, for you to feel better. That's the safety seeker taking over the mind. And then we start telling ourselves stories like, oh, if this happens next, I'll be fine. Right? So we're seeking this external event, and that event we seek might be the next big winner, right? So a trader increases size unjustifiably, saying that, oh, this next win is going to make it all better. Or on the negative side, we sometimes even find safety in blowing accounts, right? Mark Douglas, Paula T. Webb, they talk a lot about the nearest door to safety. Sometimes blowing the account, erasing all that bad that led to that point, becomes the option that we unconsciously seek. So a powerful question, once you come out of being triggered, is to ask yourself, on a scale of 1 to 10, how big was that situation and how big was my reaction? And you can, wherever you catch it, right? I said once it's over, but wherever you're at, let me say this. There's a point of injecting logic, right? As Jared Tendler says, there's a point of when you want to become aware and your goal is to push it back, right? So maybe it's after the trigger the first time, right? Which is why I said that. But then maybe it's as it's coming on, or maybe your reaction is a little bit better this time, right? We talk about the reaction method when it comes to one of the growth methods. So whenever you catch it, a powerful question is, once you're coming out of that, is how big was the situation and how big was my reaction? And if there was a huge gap, it usually signals a trigger. So you want to capture these in your journal. This is step 2. Right after, later that day, maybe if you catch it before, wherever it is, it doesn't matter if it was last week, right? And you're listening to this show and you're remembering a time. Jot down brief notes about each triggering experience, right? Just what was going on, what's happening that might have led to that internally and externally. So you're including what happened right before, anything you can recall, the who, where, what was said or done, what happened, what you felt, right? The emotions, the words you might have been telling yourself, then what you did, right? How did you respond? This might be the most important part. Any automatic thought that pops in, you want to be aware of it. The self-talk that we have in a triggered state is very revealing about that state of being we hold as a safety measure, right? It's like, if someone, this was just on my mind, I saw someone getting arrested and this woman was just asking a bunch of questions and kind of escalating the situation. And they were like, okay, well, this is, why we're here. And if we listen to our triggered state, it kind of says what its business is there. A lot of times we want to ignore the voice, right? So it's hard. We want to quickly try to rewrite the script. Like, oh no, I don't believe that about myself. But that inner voice does, and it's protecting it. And if you start ignoring it, it's going to cause you to miss an opportunity, right? And now I'm not saying engage with this message, right? Have a conversation with this negative voice that's telling you these things, but listen, jot it down, all that you hear, the things like, oh, I'll never get this. It's better if I just give up, right? Find a safe route. This is too much. It's a scam. All the inner talk needs to find its way to paper for further examination. So the big takeaway here on step 2 is from bringing awareness to the situation, and it's seeing what causes you to be triggered, and then what your mind says in a triggered state. And another key here is the self-exploration, right? So that's kind of step 3. Notice how your physical body reacts when you're triggered, right? What's going on physically? Is it a tight chest? Is it a jaw clenching? Is it a stomach drop? Is it like a heat, a numbness, an urge to move? Pins and needles, right? Whatever it can be. These sensations, they often show up before you consciously know you're triggered, right? So learning your early personal warning sign, right? Whatever sensation, that can help you catch triggers sooner. We all know what a fire alarm or tornado warning siren means, but we may not know what our personal pre-trigger alarm feels like. You may not notice it at first, but when you start focusing on decreasing triggers, you might see it. Step 4, you want to review a week or two of entries and highlight patterns. So step 4 is look for these repeating patterns, right? And then you can start to corral in these triggers. You know what? I'm feeling triggered at this time. I've told it a few weeks ago about the story about me and the morning traffic. And for a while I was working that gig, it was the traffic itself. Then it became getting my coffee, thinking about traffic. And then my mind started to associate even the days of the week with having to get into traffic, right? So you can see that's a good example there of how our body pushes out the protection mechanisms, right? So I would be stressed out just getting in the car, getting ready to get in traffic. So we're looking for patterns. You're looking for common situations, themes, or specific cues, even similar situations that lead you to being triggered, right? Like things related to different negative or positive P&L levels, right? Because it might be after a few losses, or it might be when you're close to a goal. So write those things down. We're looking for patterns. Number 5, you want to find that core feeling underneath. So for each trigger pattern that you recognize, you just want to ask yourself, right? What did this really make me feel? Right? And be honest. Did I feel rejected, powerless, unsafe, ashamed, unseen, disrespected? You know, it's okay to sit down alone and do this work and know yourself better. Don't be turned off. Don't be ashamed to do inner work on yourself, to make yourself a better person. No one has to see. You don't have to, stand in the middle of the city and yell these things. But I just was encouraged to say at that moment, just don't shy away from doing this for yourself. It's for you. So we're finding this core feeling underneath. This is step 5. Often that surface emotion, the anger, the irritation, is covering a deep core emotion like rejection, fear, shame. So naming that core feeling is key to knowing what's actually being poked, right? I remember when I was having a certain trigger point, right? I would name that person. He would mess things up, right? So it was mess things up, Jason, right? I called him Mason. And that feeling in my chest I would get, right? And I would just detail it. That warm center of the chest burning, right? That energy surging. Maybe give it a name, right? You're just trying to bring words to it to corral it in, because although words can't really describe reality, they help us point to it. So by doing that, you can know, what's actually going on there, and you'll get closer to the source. So step 6 is connect to any past experiences, if you can, on what's happening. So you want to ask yourself, what does this remind me of? Or when have I felt this exact way before? Especially, if you can think about things maybe earlier in life, right? Now, this is not your own therapy session. You're just trying to figure it out. Why do I believe this, right? I'm triggered because I have an unconscious belief that this situation is unsafe. Why do I believe that, right? It's just a question to yourself. It's not like you're laying down on a couch, talking to yourself. You're just trying to figure it out. Maybe it was in other business area. You felt the same way. Maybe it was a past relationship or family situation. Just ask yourself, what's happening here, man? What are you telling me, body? And you can ignore a lot of things. Don't ignore yourself. You can also ask, what does this remind me of? Or when have I felt this exact way before? And then you want to look for, things early in life, other business areas, and of course, past relationships and family situations. So Did I read the same question twice or say the same question twice? Let me check my notes here. I'm getting off track. So that first question, right? What does this remind me of? Yeah, I think that's the best question. Thought I had two. When have I had this feeling before? Is the other one. So you're doing this light detective work, right? And not heavy detective work, right? You're not fretting. You're just mapping today's triggers to older experiences that had similar, cues. Maybe the tone, the situation, maybe it looks similar. And you can find out when they were paired with strong pain, criticism, chaos, threat. You'd be like, you know what? I do remember the first time I felt this way. And you know what, buddy? We're cool. Like, that was a one-off kind of situation, man. That's not what's happening right now. You can start working through it. So 7, what you want to do is you're creating this personal trigger map. So you can start working through it. So you're going to put this all together here in step 7, creating a log or a map of triggering events to summarize what you found. And then you're going to write it in a simple sentence. And here's the template. You're going to write down, and you know what? Write this question down right now, so you have it when you need it. So this is the formula. When X happens, I tend to feel Y and do Z. So I'll give you a few examples. Let me say it again. When X happens, I tend to feel Y and do Z. And I promise you, step 7, although it's the 6 steps are leading up to this, step 7 is going to be so powerful if you do it. Maybe if you do it alone, but it's, you might not have the clarity. So let me break this down. When the market immediately moves against my entry, that's X, I feel disrespected and stupid. That's why. And I either double down to prove I'm right or exit early and then chase the next move. That's Z. Let me give you another example. When I see other traders post big wins while I'm red on the day, this is X, I feel behind, inferior, pressured. That's why. And I abandon my rules. I size up impulsively and I try to catch up. That's Z. Let me give you another one. When I'm on a losing streak or have several red days in a row, that's X. Y, I feel panicked, ashamed, and like I'm failing as a trader. Z. And I either revenge trade to make it back or shut down and stop following my plan. Right? So when X happens, I tend to feel Y and do Z. And this personal trigger map, which is, just what I'm calling it. I don't know if that's an official name or not, but it's going to give you a clear written picture of what sets you off, how you react, and what you actually need instead, which is just the opposite, right? Or something different. Doesn't have to be opposite, but it's different. And this is there for you so you can respond deliberately instead of getting hijacked by automatic patterns. If you know you have this XYZ statement, you have a real increased, better chance of not letting XYZ happen to you tomorrow. Because there's benefits to this trigger map. It serves the purpose of increasing awareness, self-awareness, most importantly. And it does this by making your emotional patterns visible instead of vague. You can see, this is a specific situation reliably producing a specific reaction. It's the facts of myself. It strengthens emotional regulation and decision-making, bringing awareness here because you start to recognize these triggers early letting you pause and choose a better response, which reduces stress and impulsive behavior over time. A lot of times we're just trying to consciously just jump into an unconscious pattern that's playing out. And we're like, whoa, stop. And sometimes we can, sometimes we can't, sometimes we miss the boat. But to get on the path of growth, we got to keep trying. So what do you do after creating this map, right? You're going to use it as a data playbook, right? And this is self-data. When you notice a known trigger starting, right? Because you've written it down, like a losing streak, maybe a shortened broker message, criticism, P&L related results, whatever it is, you want to run a pre-planned sequence, something that's like a pause, breathe, choose reaction for the next step from a better state. So here's the most important thing I want you to take away from this information. You have to escape the triggered state before you're in a place to get back on track towards your goals. Let me say this again. This is important. This is something that I wish I had known my first year in trading. You have to escape the triggered state before you're in a place to get back on track towards your goals. You have to escape the state before you can get back on track. I'm confident that if you avoid the trap of seeking to create a new state by chasing a certain external outcome, you'll improve as a day trader. I promise you. You have to seek to get back to baseline, because that's something consistently prosperous traders do. In a trigger state, all action is just a fast track to safety, right? We may consciously think like, I'm just going to rush, but you're rushing to failure. The results will only get worse, even though your mind is telling you, one more winning trade and I'm good. Let me just buy a few more evaluations after blowing that one and I'll be great. Let me just take a few trades for the market closes and I'll be better. Let me just make half of this back. You may not say this consciously, but once triggered, look at what seems like the next best step in that state and understand that you need to do something different. Better yet, do nothing until you clear that state. When I was young, this kind of reminds me of this. I used to play Mario Brothers, right? And the main character, Mario, he'd get hit by an enemy and you got like 2 chances before you died. So he'd be big and then he'd turn small. And when Mario was small, most players, you just had to avoid the turtles. You didn't really want to chance it and try to jump on something, even though you still had the same power to defeat them, right? The fire shooting plants, all of those things. You just kind of took a different avoidance actions until you found that growth mushroom that you could get back to being aggressive. Now, not everyone played that way, but you just knew you were on the edge after you got hit once. My point is, we have to find ways to resolve deep-seated beliefs and thoughts that made us get triggered. But the only thing that trumps this is the plan of avoiding the damaging actions once triggered. Right? So we have this overarching plan to kind of clear these things up. But number one, avoid the damaging actions that can happen once we're triggered. And 2, I guess, is we can actively seek to escape that triggered state to get back into a calm state. So there's kind of 3 things going on there. We want to get that clear state of being before moving forward on our journey. Don't run through the stop signs of being triggered, right? It's a halt in your journey, not forever, just at that moment. Take the time to understand what yourself and your life wants you to know. Don't rush through it, because you're on the slow path when you rush through it. It's like you're at a crossroad and it's like you can sprint through this mud over here, or you can walk on that paved sidewalk. And a lot of times we choose to run through the mud because that's what the state that hijacked us at that moment is telling us to do. Don't push things down. Witness what's going on. Don't NPC your life and just think, because it's been a certain way for some time, it has to be that way moving forward. It doesn't. The same belief will block you from having different results in your life, like the trading success you seek. So overarchingly, we're working on resolving these triggers. Lots of tools for that. Most recently, I've been talking a lot about HRV. But we have to avoid damaging ourselves and our goals in the moment. And we have to seek to get back to a good state before we want to engage with the market again. However long it takes, it's worth it. In closing, triggers suck, but they can point directly to the doors you need to open to step into your next level of success. Listen back to this as many times as you need to, right? Get familiar with the 7 steps of actions. And traders, have a good week. Just stay at it, my friends. Your time's coming. If you stay the course and you start stacking days of doing the right things, nothing and no one can stop you, not even the older version of you. So here's to being the hero of your story. Let's check in next week. I'll talk to you then.